Hey, guess what? 2008 was 16 years ago. And that means that Grand Theft Auto 4 also came out 16 years ago. Man, I can't believe it's been that long. I kinda have to remind myself that we're not in 2012 anymore and that 2008 was not 4 years ago. Last year I did a video just talking about the game and going over some fond memories from the late 2000s. But I liked the game so much that I thought, what the hell, why not do another video like I did with GTA 5's 10th anniversary, where I give you guys a list of 10 things that happened during this game's development, 10 ways that the game became what it is, things that we only know about now thanks to interviews with staff from the otherwise notoriously secretive Rockstar Games. Let's get the show on the road with fact number 1, the development timeline. The game was released on April 29, 2008, but development first began almost 4 years prior in November of 2004, not long after San Andreas came out. And those were some pretty big footsteps to follow. According to an interview with EdgeOnline.com, Sam Houser had this to say about it. Following up San Andreas is a nightmare. A good nightmare, but a nightmare. And then with the new hardware, it set a new kind of expectation. People are really going to expect something bloody cool and very progressive, and very evolved from anything that's gone before in a big way. You can tell in some of these interviews that they were excited to put the technology behind the 7th generation of consoles to good use. Compared to what they could do with the PS2, the Xbox 360 and PS3 were going to let them make something a lot bigger, a lot more immersive, and with a lot of really cool new technology behind it. And with that, we go into fact number 2, the game's physics engine, Euphoria, which was developed by a British animation technology company called Natural Motion. These physics quickly became a hallmark of the game. This was the first Rockstar game to not have the same pre-rendered animations every time you dropped someone or ran them over. But with GTA 4, hitting someone with your car in that game actually looks like it hurts a lot. And it looked way better than the usual ragdoll physics that a lot of other games had by then. But the game almost might not have used Euphoria. Going back to that interview with Sam, he said this. When we initially saw Euphoria, I was floored. I was like, that's my dream, it's happening, it's here, let's do it. But all the realists who actually have to make the stuff were like, Sam, man, it's never gonna work. It's never going to happen. He went on to say that the technology was originally pitched as something that they could use for cutscenes, like if they needed a good shot of someone falling down the stairs, which definitely works if they don't want to risk having one of their motion capture actors throw themselves down a flight of stairs. I mean, I know stuntmen can probably do that sort of thing, but there's a lot of liabilities either way with that. And good stuntmen who can do stuff like that and have it only look like it hurts without actually hurting them probably don't come cheap. But then why save this tech just for cutscenes when you can screw around in the game world too? Thankfully, they were able to get it working within the game in real time. It took a team of software engineers from Natural Motion to work on-site at Rockstar North for several months to get it integrated into Rockstar's proprietary engine, Rage. And the end result is fantastic to say the least. Fact number 3. Let's talk about Liberty City. For GTA 4, Rockstar decided to bring the action back to Liberty City, but instead of just reusing the same setting that GTA 3 had, they instead decided to remake the entire city. The end result was something that had a much stronger resemblance to New York City in the late 2000s. But why did they decide on this as the game's setting? I know that the original Liberty City was meant to be more of a generic kind of East Coast city, but the main basis for it was obviously still New York. According to a Variety interview with Dan Houser, part of this was down to familiarity and ease of access for the people at Rockstar. The bulk of the game's development is in Scotland, and Rockstar's founders and most leadership are British, but their main offices are in New York. And at the time, both Houser brothers lived there. A lot of their production staff are also in the New York area. Therefore, location scouting would have been super easy for a lot of their staff. They were basically just running around in their own backyard taking pictures of familiar places. Aside from the reference photography, their development offices in Scotland also had TVs set up that would constantly play stock footage of New York in a loop, so their designers would all be well aware of how it looked every time they look up or walk down a hallway. In a way, this has made the game a time capsule back to New York in the late 2000s. A majority of the design work and research was probably done around 2005 or 2006. And part of that detail leads us to our next fact. Fact number 4. They put a surprising amount of effort into figuring out what cars were being driven the most by New York area residents. It turns out they researched used car sales statistics and catalogs to figure out what types of vehicles were being driven the most in the New York City area. I guess this accounts for the lack of too many supercars populating the traffic. Most cars in the game are accurately average. They're just point A to point B daily drivers and service vehicles. Most date back to the mid-2000s, but at that time, you would still see a lot of cars from the 80s and 90s being driven around too. A lot of cars from way back then were still not completely falling apart yet by that point. And all these cars would be enough to get you from one side of the map to the other if you didn't just take a cab or ride the subway, or steal a chopper and just fly across the map. But did you know that at one point there could have possibly been a lot more map to navigate across? Maybe you did, but let's run with it anyway. Fact number 5. The earliest plans for GTA 4 called for the game to be set on a map containing 3 entire states: New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. That sounds huge, and according to Sam Houser, it was. It was the logical first answer to how do we top San Andreas. Instead of one state with 3 cities, how about 3 states with multiple cities within them? That plan, going by the rough drawing of it, called for Liberty City to be the main city in the middle of the map. To the east, you'd have Long Island, with communities like the Hamptons and Fire Island. To the north, you would have an area that was supposed to be the rest of the state of New York, including mountain ranges and cities like Buffalo and Albany. West of there, you'd have a much larger New Jersey, and to the northeast of the map, you'd have Connecticut, featuring Darien and Stamford. I did an entire video about this exact topic, and I went way more in depth with it, so if you're interested in this, make sure you check it out. Now you might be asking, why the hell didn't they go with that map? That sounds awesome. And if you're from anywhere in the tri-state area that's not in New York City, you might even be wondering, what the hell? Maybe they could have featured your hometown in the game. Well, apparently they realized at some point that they'd rather have quality over quantity. A smaller map focusing on a single urban area could allow them to pack in much more detail than a game taking place across such a huge area. This was the second game to be made using their then-new proprietary engine, Rage, but it was the first to be this major in size and scope. I wouldn't doubt it if they wanted to really familiarize themselves with the engine and all of the technical intricacies of it and figure out what they could and couldn't do before they really dove into the deep end with a huge map. Fact number 6. Airplanes were considered in the game at one point. A lot of people really liked flying around in planes in San Andreas, and they were disappointed that they weren't in GTA 4. But airplanes were considered at one point. They just got dropped early on. Overall, the game had a much smaller selection of air vehicles. There were no planes, just helicopters. Now, the reason that there were no planes is because by the time they figured out what they really wanted to do with the map, they realized that it would be too small to accommodate planes. The only planes that are in the game are just these 747s that are basically parts of the scenery. There's actually some airplane handling data that's still in the files of the game. Some of these are just reused from San Andreas, although the fighter is new, provided that it's not just a code name for the Hydra. You know, when you tie this into the original map concept, one of my friends mentioned to me that it's entirely possible that this map could have gone beyond the drawing board. Maybe there's a possibility that they could have started development with this type of map in mind, and therefore that's why they were laying some of the groundwork to be able to put airplanes in the game. Of course, then at some point early on, the map would have been scaled way back, then they would have known that they weren't going to add planes anymore, and then they forgot to remove all the handling data. Let's move on now to a completely unrelated fact. Fact number 7. A few lucky fans got chosen to have their voices in the game. In the summer of 2007, Rockstar launched a promotional website for the game that was supposed to be the website for an in-game conservative talk radio station. They had a phone number along with the website, urging fans to call in and leave a recording with their name and telling them what they think is wrong with America. I'm sure probably hundreds of people made those calls, but the few who got chosen ended up being some of the callers for WKTT's Richard Bastion show.
Next caller.
First of all, I'd just like to say I love this show. You know, it's great. You're doing a good job for this city.
Thank you. I agree completely. Get to the point.
Where the hell do these liberal fascists get off trying to censor pornography?
I'm pretty sure a couple of these callers made it onto the Vibe as well. They kind of sound like actual phone recordings instead of just voice actors in a studio with a phone effect applied afterwards.
Hey, this is Mark Anthony. Yeah, my girlfriend, she cheats on me all the time.
This is your mom, Clark. And I just gotta say, I gotta tell you, man, I love the show. I love it how you just got people calling in, telling you all their problems and stuff like that. And I'm loving the way you doing it. And then my ex-girlfriend, she is a bitch.
Fact number 8. There are a lot of reasons that have been given for why the game isn't as feature-heavy as San Andreas. Obviously, with airplanes, they thought the map was going to be too small. with the role-playing features that San Andreas had, stuff like building up your player stats to get better at doing things in the game. They said it would involve too many animations. But then you've got other stuff like customization options, which were far more minimal compared to San Andreas. According to the developers, they really wanted Nico to be portrayed in the way that they wanted him to be. They didn't want to have him doing anything that would be seen as antithetical to his character. Therefore, this is why you can't just have Nico running around half naked with a blonde faux hawk and geisha makeup. Although different hairstyles were planned for the game. An early image found in the files shows that a barbershop was an interior at one point, and with a trainer you can access 2 cut hairstyles. There's a buzz cut and his usual hair but slightly longer, both of which can also be seen in early screenshots. I suspect that a big reason as to why we didn't get as much stuff as San Andreas could have been down to the lack of familiarity with the new engine. I feel like getting the game to actually work correctly took priority over a lot of other things, and as time was running out, things that would have been nice to have probably just going to be fully implemented. And besides, with the power of modern technology in the year 2024, we can now have Nico looking however he'd like. Hell, even without mods, we can leave the scrubs on for the entire game and pretend that he's a nurse. If you ask yourself, what would Nico do? I'm not sure if he'd actually do that, but hey, it's an option. Fact number 9. Russian actor Vladimir Mashkov, best known for his role as Sasha in Behind Enemy Lines, was approached by Rockstar to voice a character in the game, but he turned the role down. He explained this in an interview with Russian TV. According to him, Rockstar said that they wanted him to voice a character in an upcoming game of theirs, but because he didn't play video games or really care about them, he had no clue about how popular Rockstar's games were with people, and he didn't really take it seriously. Not only that, he said that the Rockstar people who approached him were being oddly secretive about the project. That definitely checks out too. According to Nico's voice actor, Michael Hollick, when he first auditioned for the game, he was told that it was a video game called Frozen. Yeah, that's right. They also didn't tell him that his character's name was going to be Nico. Most likely they gave characters code names as well. And originally he had only been asked to do the motion capture work. Then they heard him actually speaking the lines and thought, hey, this guy could actually do the voice acting too. Meanwhile, for GTA 5's casting call, they decided to give the game a code name called Rush. Now, in the past couple of years, a few actors have added on their resume a project called Fireball by Rockstar Games. That is most likely the code name for Grand Theft Auto 6. Now, on top of everything I mentioned before, he would have also had to have flown to the US to do the recording. Considering that he's based out of Moscow, that was probably going to cause too many scheduling conflicts with whatever else he might have already had lined up. Or maybe he just figured it would be too much of a hassle having to go between 2 countries sporadically for a job. So he turned it down. He didn't specify which role he was offered, but we can assume that he was probably supposed to voice Nico. After all, Nico's appearance was directly based on his character in Behind Enemy Lines. It would kind of make sense that they would want him to voice his likeness as well. It would have been strange hearing Nico with a different voice actor, though. By the way, Mashkov also told the interviewer that after the game came out, he completely regretted turning it down. And that sucks. Hey, at least he had a role still big enough to have an impact on the developers that they wanted to make the main character of the game look like him. Fact number 10. They apparently thought about doing a co-op mode for the story, but it got dropped early on. In March of 2008, Hillary Goldstein of IGN got a chance to interview Dan Houser and Aaron Garbett about the upcoming release of GTA 4. At one point, she asked them, why isn't there a co-op mode in the campaign? Is that something where co-op is too much of a limitation of the main story? Houser replied with, yeah, we toyed with it, and we felt we came to a compromise by putting in a separate mode that was designed and scripted and driven with more elements than the main multiplayer, but less than the main story. He also said that if they did make the whole game co-op, that the single-player story would have been massively compromised, and that he hasn't yet played a game where that wasn't the case. She then asked, why do you think that is? Obviously, co-op is going to be a big part of gaming moving forward. Houser responded with, I'm sure someone will, but I'm also sure at the moment that you can't design a level using AI and then take out the AI and use another human being and have the level perfectly balanced for both. It depends on what you want. The game is either going to work better one or the other, or you have to make 2 separate things, which is the path we chose to go down. Given that he said that they toyed with it at one point, I'm guessing he meant that they probably just experimented with it early on to see if it was something that was possible for them to do. But when you consider how the story was written, they probably figured it would be hard for a second person to just jump in and actually have it make any sense. All of a sudden you've got somebody tagging along with Nico. Even though admittedly it would be kinda cool. But I get it, from a story perspective it just wouldn't make any sense. And for all I know, there's a few missions that probably would have been difficult to do if you had two people. Funny thing, Saints Row 2 came out later that same year and they had the entire story and every side mission fully playable with co-op. I think something like this in GTA would be awesome someday. Imagine for GTA 6, you could be playing as Jason, and then a friend can join your game as Lucia, and you could just run around doing story missions or single-player stuff together. But then you might also ask, why not just get on GTA Online with your friends? If you want to screw around with them, you're free to do so in a separate mode where inflation is even worse than it is in real life. And those are 10 facts about the development of Grand Theft Auto 4. 16 years later, I'd say it's still among one of my favorite games ever. And because it was such a huge step for Rockstar to take, there are a lot of interesting stories about its development, some of which we still might not know about. But I hope you learned something new about this game from this video anyway. And if you never played it before, go check it out. If you have played it before, then do yourself a favor and play it again. Even if it's just for the bowling, or to hear Nico get drunk and yell yellow car, or to have the most fun you'll ever have on a swing set in a video game.